Part 1. The Return. I came home on a Thursday night, the kind of night that feels heavier than it should. The sky above Cedar Grove, Illinois, was overcast, low and gray, pressing down on the quiet suburban street as if the air itself was exhausted. So was I. 2 weeks, 14 days sleeping in hospital chairs, eating vending machine dinners, and listening to the rhythmic beeping of heart monitors. My mother's stroke had come without warning, one phone call at 2:47 a.m. My sister's voice shaking, the words tumbling over each other. "Dad, it's Mom." She collapsed. "They don't know how bad it is." I booked the first flight from Chicago to Seattle and didn't think twice. Now, my mother was stable. Still weak, still frightened, but alive. The doctors said the worst had passed. I hugged her goodbye that morning, promised I'd call every day, and boarded the red-eye back home with a single thought burning in my chest. Emily. My wife, my anchor, the woman I'd been married to for 39 years. She was 62 now, diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's nearly 2 years ago. Slowly progressing, the neurologist had said. Plenty of good days left, and most days that was true. Emily forgot appointments, misplaced keys, sometimes asked the same question twice in 10 minutes, but she still laughed at old sitcoms, still folded laundry with military precision, still called me Sammy like she had when we were 23 and broken stupidly in love. 2 weeks away from her felt like a lifetime. I pulled into the driveway just after 8 p.m. The porch light was off. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Emily always left the porch light on. Even before the diagnosis, she hated the idea of a dark house. "It looks lonely," she used to say. After the Alzheimer's, routine mattered even more. Lights on, doors locked, dinner at 6, Wheel of Fortune at 7. I sat in the car for a moment, the engine idling, my hand resting on the steering wheel as unease crept up my spine. Maybe our daughter forgot, I told myself. Rachel had promised to stay with Emily while I was gone. She was 37, a licensed financial advisor, organized to a fault. She knew her mother's routines. She'd practically grown up managing spreadsheets and calendars. If anyone could handle this, it was her. Still, the darkness bothered me. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk and walked up the front steps, fumbling for my keys. That's when I heard it. A dull sound, repetitive, soft but urgent. Thump, thump, thump. I froze. At first, my exhausted brain tried to explain it away. Pipes, maybe. The furnace kicking on. An old house always makes noises. Then it came again. Thump, thump. And beneath it, barely audible, a sound that made my blood turn to ice. A voice. Muffled, hoarse, weak. "Hello?" The suitcase slipped from my hand and hit the concrete with a hollow crack. My heart slammed against my ribs as I shoved the key into the lock and burst through the front door. The house smelled wrong. Not the warm, familiar mix of laundry detergent and lemon cleaner Emily favored. This was stale, sour, like air that hadn't moved in days. The sound was clearer now. It was coming from below, from the basement. "Emily?" I shouted, my voice echoing through the dark living room. "Emily?" No answer, just the thumping again, faster now, frantic. I ran to the basement door and stopped short. There was a padlock on it. A thick, industrial-looking padlock looped through the handle, I'd never seen it before in my life. "What the hell is this?" I whispered, my hands shaking as I grabbed the lock and pulled. It didn't budge. From the other side of the door, a weak cry broke through. "Sam, please." That voice. I felt something inside me fracture. "I'm here!" I yelled, panic exploding in my chest. "I'm here! Hold on!" I sprinted to the garage, grabbed the crowbar from the wall, something I hadn't touched since fixing the fence years ago, and ran back. My hands were slick with sweat as I jammed the metal into the lock. One yank. Nothing. Another. The lock groaned. The third pull snapped it open with a metallic shriek. I threw the door open. The smell hit me first. Urine, sweat, something rotten and acidic that burned my nose. I flipped on the light, and the world tilted. Emily was crumpled at the bottom of the basement stairs. Her nightgown was torn and filthy, clinging to her thin frame. Her hair was matted, her lips were cracked, bleeding. Dark circles ringed her eyes, which looked far too large in her gaunt face. She looked small, so much smaller than she should have. She raised her head slowly, squinting into the light like someone emerging from a cave. For a moment, her expression was blank, confused, afraid. Then her eyes found mine. "Sam?" she whispered, uncertainty trembling in her voice. Is that really you?" I was down the stairs in seconds, dropping to my knees beside her, pulling her into my arms. She weighed almost nothing. I could feel every bone. "I'm here," I choked, pressing my forehead to hers. "I'm so sorry. I've got you. You're safe now." Her body trembled violently as she clung to my shirt. "I was scared," she murmured. "It was dark. I didn't know how long." I scooped her up, every instinct screaming that she was too fragile, too light, and carried her upstairs. My mind raced, crashing into questions I wasn't ready to answer. Who did this? How long had she been down there? Where was Rachel? I laid Emily gently on the couch and grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking so badly I nearly dropped it as I dialed 911. As the dispatcher answered, I looked around the living room, and that's when I realized this wasn't just an accident. The furniture was moved. Boxes I didn't recognize were stacked against the wall. The pill organizer that always sat on the kitchen counter was gone. My chest tightened as a terrible thought began to form. By the time the paramedics arrived, I was already starting to understand, and I was terrified of what the truth might be. The paramedics worked quickly. Too quickly. That was the first sign of how bad things really were. One of them knelt beside Emily on the couch, checking her pulse, her blood pressure, shining a small light into her eyes. Another hung an IV bag with practiced efficiency. They spoke in low voices, clipped and professional, but I caught enough fragments to make my stomach drop. Severely dehydrated. Signs of malnutrition. How long has she been like this? I stood there uselessly, my hands hovering in the air like I was afraid to touch her again, afraid she might break. "I don't know," I said, my voice hoarse. "I just got home. I found her in the basement." The paramedic's eyes flicked up to mine. Something changed in his expression. Not shock, something heavier. "How long were you away, sir?" 2 weeks. He didn't say anything, but the silence screamed. They loaded Emily onto the stretcher, wrapping her in thermal blankets even though it was early September and still warm outside. She looked impossibly small beneath the layers, her eyes fluttering as if she might disappear if I blinked. I rode in the ambulance, holding her hand, whispering apologies that came too late. At Mercy General Hospital, they rushed her into the ER. I was left standing in the hallway, staring at my own reflection in the polished floor, 65 years old, gray at the temples, eyes hollow with shock. A nurse pulled me aside. "Mr. Carter," she said gently, "we need to ask you some questions." That tone. I nodded. "Has your wife been confined for an extended period of time?" The word confined hit me like a punch. I don't know," I said. "She was supposed to be cared for. Our daughter was staying with her." The nurse's pen paused midair. "How long ago did you last see your wife before tonight?" 14 days. She wrote that down, her lips pressed into a thin line. 14 days. My Emily. 14 days in a locked basement. A police officer arrived less than an hour later. He introduced himself as Detective Alan Brooks, Elder Abuse Unit, Cook County Sheriff's Office. He was in his late 40s, calm, methodical, with eyes that missed nothing. "There's a unit just for this?" I asked numbly. He nodded. "Unfortunately, yes." We sat in a quiet consultation room while doctors worked on Emily. I told him everything: my mother's stroke, the emergency flight to Seattle, Rachel volunteering to stay behind. She insisted, I said. Said she had everything under control. Detective Brooks listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes. "How often did you speak to your wife while you were away?" "Every day at first," I said. Rachel answered. Said Emily was resting, watching TV, eating well. "And later?" "The second week." Rachel stopped answering calls. She texted instead. Said she was busy, that Mom was fine. "Did you speak to your wife directly at any point?" I swallowed. No. I tried. Her phone always went to voicemail. Detective Brooks leaned back slightly. "Mr. Carter," he said carefully, "did you give your daughter power of attorney over your wife's affairs while you were gone?" "No," I said immediately. "Absolutely not. Are you aware of your wife signing any legal or financial documents recently?" "No." He closed his notebook. "We'll need to investigate further," he said. "But I want to be honest with you. This does not look like an accident or simple neglect." The words hung between us, heavy and suffocating. Emily stayed in the hospital for 3 days. They treated her dehydration, monitored her heart, ran test after test. Physically, she began to stabilize. Mentally, it was worse. She kept asking the same question. "Where's Rachel?" Every time, my heart cracked a little more. "She was here," Emily insisted, her brow furrowed in confusion. "She brought me soup, didn't she?" I lied. "Yeah," I said softly. "She did." On the second day, while Emily slept, I went home. I needed answers. The house felt hostile now, like it was hiding something. I walked slowly, deliberately, forcing myself to see what I'd missed. The basement door, padlocked from the outside. I went down again, my stomach twisting. The light bulb was gone, unscrewed completely. In the corner sat a plastic bucket. My hands started shaking. That was when I saw the scratches. Deep, frantic gouges in the wood near the door handle. I staggered back up the stairs and nearly vomited. Upstairs, the kitchen was worse. Rachel's laptop sat on the table, still open. I hesitated. I'd raised her to respect privacy, to do the right thing, but my wife had been locked in a basement. I sat down and opened the files. What I found made my blood run cold. Scanned documents, bank statements, real estate forms, power of attorney paperwork with Emily's signature. I stared at it, my vision blurring. No, 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 no. I opened another folder, and another. Transfers totaling $180,000. A home equity line of credit I had never authorized. Our savings money set aside for Emily's care gone. All of it routed to a company called Silver Oak Strategic Investments. I looked it up, registered 6 months ago. CEO, Mark Reynolds, Rachel's husband. The room felt like it was spinning. Then I found the messages, text exchanges between Rachel and Mark. She keeps asking for your dad. She'll forget. Give it time. What if he calls the house? He won't. He's across the country. They had planned this. I called Detective Brooks immediately. When he arrived with 2 other officers, I didn't need to explain much. The evidence spoke for itself. This is elder abuse, he said quietly. Financial exploitation. Unlawful confinement. I sank into a chair. Where are they? I asked. We don't know yet, he said, but we'll find them. As they bagged the laptop and photographed the basement, a horrifying realization settled in my chest. If I hadn't come home early, if my mother hadn't recovered faster, Emily would still be down there, or worse. And the people who did this were my own blood. Detective Brooks didn't waste time. Within hours of leaving my house, the case had grown teeth. 2 uniformed officers stayed behind to secure the property, while the rest of the team moved fast. Subpoenas issued, accounts flagged, digital trails followed. I watched them work with a strange sense of detachment, like I was observing someone else's life unravel from a distance. This wasn't my family. Not really. Rachel wouldn't do this. She couldn't. I kept telling myself that even as the evidence piled up, even as the house echoed with the sounds of doors opening and closing, cameras flashing, radios crackling, but doubt had already taken root, and it was spreading. That night, I slept in a chair beside Emily's hospital bed. She was calmer now, sedated enough to rest, but every so often she stirred, her fingers searching for my hand, like a child afraid of the dark. "Don't go," she whispered once. "I'm here," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." I meant it. The next morning, Detective Brooks met me in the hospital cafeteria. He had a coffee he clearly hadn't touched. "We tracked your daughter's financial activity," he said. "She and her husband moved the funds quickly. Too quickly. That suggests planning." I closed my eyes. "How much?" I asked. "All of it," he replied. "Your savings, the home equity. Roughly $180,000. I felt numb. "That company, Silver Oak Strategic, what is it?" I asked. "On paper, a financial consulting firm. In reality," he exhaled, "looks like a shell, possibly a Ponzi-style operation. Your son-in-law has several elderly investors on record." "Elderly?" I repeated bitterly. "Of course he does." Detective Brooks hesitated before speaking again. "There's something else." I braced myself. "We believe your daughter wasn't just involved," he said carefully. "She may have been the one running point." The words cut deeper than anything else I'd heard. "No," I said. "Rachel wouldn't. She's an advisor. She knows the law." "Exactly," he replied. "And that's why this is so serious." Later that afternoon, They found Rachel and Mark's condo in downtown Evanston. Empty. Furniture gone. Closets bare. The kind of rushed evacuation that screamed flight. But criminals always make mistakes. In the trash, officers found bank paperwork, printed itineraries, one-way tickets, destination, Lisbon, Portugal. They were going to run, Detective Brooks told me over the phone. Portugal doesn't extradite easily for financial crimes. My legs gave out. I sat on the hospital floor, my back against the wall. They were going to leave her, I whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. 2 days later, warrants were issued. Rachel Carter, Mark Reynolds, elder abuse, fraud, unlawful imprisonment, forgery. Their photos were on the news that night. Financial advisor and husband wanted in elder abuse case. I turned off the TV. Emily was released from the hospital on day 4. She was weaker than before physically and mentally, but she smiled when she saw the house again. I like it when the lights are on, she said. I nodded and turned on every lamp. She stopped asking about Rachel. That scared me more than the questions. It was like her mind had erased our daughter entirely. The arrest came sooner than anyone expected. Customs flagged Rachel and Mark at O'Hare International Airport as they attempted to board a flight to London, their first stop before Portugal. They didn't resist. They didn't cry. Detective Brooks called me personally. We have them, he said. They're in custody. I felt nothing. No relief. No satisfaction. Just emptiness. The charges came down hard. Multiple felony counts. Mark's investment firm unraveled overnight. Investigators discovered over 30 victims, most of them elderly, most of them drained of their life savings. Rachel had helped recruit them. She'd used her credentials. My daughter wasn't a victim. She was a partner. At the bail hearing, Rachel cried. She said she'd made a mistake, that she loved her mother, that she'd never meant for things to go so far. The judge denied bail. Flight risk. Danger to the victim. I walked out without looking at her. That night, I sat beside Emily as she slept, her breathing shallow but steady. I thought about the girl I'd taught to ride a bike. The woman who had locked her own mother in a basement. And I understood something I wish I never had. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes, it looks like family. The trial began in early June. By then, it had already destroyed what little remained of my old life. Emily's condition worsened under stress, just as her neurologist had warned. The trauma accelerated everything. Her confusion deepened. Her short-term memory fractured. Some days she remembered me clearly. Other days she studied my face like a stranger's, searching for context that refused to come. I hired a full-time caregiver. The bills piled up. The house paid off for nearly 20 years now carried debt again because of the home equity loan Rachel had taken out in our names. And the people responsible sat in jail, waiting. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Rachel sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back tightly, her hands folded in her lap like a schoolgirl awaiting punishment. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not fragile, just diminished. Mark sat beside her, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically. Power of attorney fraud, bank transfers, the basement, the text messages, Portugal. There was no drama at first, just facts, one after another, like nails being driven into a coffin. Then Mark's lawyer stood, and everything changed. Mark had taken a deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he agreed to testify against Rachel. I felt sick when I heard it, but the prosecutor looked almost relieved. When Mark took the stand, he didn't look at me. He didn't look at Emily. He looked at the jury. It was Rachel's idea, he said. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. She planned it, he continued. She researched power of attorney laws. She found the notary. She timed everything around Mr. Carter's trip. Rachel's head snapped up. "That's a lie," she whispered, but no one heard her. Mark kept going. She said her mother wouldn't remember, that the confusion would help. She said we just needed time. The prosecutor displayed the texts on the screen. "She'll forget. Give it another day." The jury stared. I stared at my daughter. She didn't look at me. Emily was called to testify on the third day. I begged the prosecutor not to do it. They said they had to. She walked slowly to the stand, guided by her caregiver, her hands trembling. She answered questions as best she could, but she kept getting lost, mixing up days, forgetting names, asking if she could go home. Rachel's attorney tried to use it. "Mrs. Carter," he said gently, "isn't it possible you're confused about what happened?" Emily frowned. "It was dark," she said softly. "I was scared." Then the prosecutor played the video. The basement. The bucket. The scratches on the door. Emily covered her face and began to cry. The jury didn't look away. Mark finished his testimony by admitting what they'd planned. "She wasn't supposed to survive down there," he said quietly. "At least, not long." That was when I broke. Rachel took the stand in her own defense. It was a mistake. She said she'd been manipulated, that Mark controlled the money, that she'd only wanted to help. The prosecutor stood. "Miss Carter," she said, calm and precise, "you texted your husband. She'll forget. The confusion helps. What did you want your mother to forget?" Silence. "You locked your mother in a basement without food or water for 14 days, the prosecutor continued. "You stole her life savings. You planned to flee the country, and you want this court to believe you never intended harm?" Rachel began to sob. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. 4 hours that felt like a lifetime. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Rachel collapsed into her chair. Sentencing came 2 months later. I submitted a victim impact statement, 5 pages, detailing what she had done to Emily, to me, to our family. Emily couldn't submit one. She no longer understood enough to try. The judge looked directly at Rachel. "You exploited your mother's cognitive decline," she said. "You betrayed not only her trust, but every standard of human decency." She sentenced Rachel to 12 years in federal prison. I didn't look at her as they led her away. I couldn't. The sentence didn't bring closure. People think prison sentences end things, that justice, once spoken aloud in a courtroom, has the power to stitch lives back together. It doesn't. Justice is loud. Consequences are quiet. Rachel was sent to a federal correctional facility in Indiana. She would be eligible for parole in 8 years. Mark was transferred to a different prison, his own sentence reduced in exchange for cooperation. I never visited either of them. I never will. The civil case settled quietly. On paper, Rachel and Mark owed us hundreds of thousands of dollars, stolen funds, damages, restitution. In reality, there was nothing to recover. The money was gone, spent, hidden, dissolved into a maze of offshore accounts and fake investments. We refinanced the house I once thought we'd grow old and die in. For the first time in 2 decades, I made monthly mortgage payments again. I watched our savings disappear into medical bills, legal fees, and full-time care. And through all of it, Emily faded. Stress accelerated the disease exactly as the doctors warned. Her neurologist explained it clinically, compassionately, but the truth was brutal. Trauma steals time from Alzheimer's patients. Not memories, time. Emily stopped asking about Rachel entirely. At first, that felt like mercy. Then it felt like grief. One afternoon, she stood in the kitchen, staring at an old family photo on the refrigerator. Rachel, at 10 years old, missing a front tooth, her arms slung around Emily's waist. "Who's that?" Emily asked. My throat closed. "Our daughter," I said. She studied the photo for a moment, then nodded politely, as if I'd introduced her to a stranger. "Oh," she said. "She looks nice." That night, I cried alone in the living room with every light turned on. The worst moment came quietly. No sirens, no hospital bed, just a Tuesday morning. Emily looked at me over breakfast, her expression gentle but distant. "I'm sorry," she said. "Can you tell me who you are?" It only lasted an hour before recognition returned. But once it happened, I knew we were entering the final chapter. People ask me sometimes if I regret pressing charges so aggressively, if I wish I'd handled it privately, if 12 years was too harsh. Here's what I tell them. Rachel locked her confused, terrified mother in a basement for 14 days. She stole the money meant to care for her as she died. She planned to let her mother disappear and then flee the country. 12 years isn't cruelty. It's mercy. Emily doesn't understand where Rachel is. Sometimes she still asks. I tell her Rachel is working far away. It's easier than explaining a truth she won't remember anyway. Last week, Emily forgot my name again. This time, it took longer to come back. I held her hand and told her stories about our life, about our first apartment, about the road trips, about how she used to sing off-key in the car and laugh when I complained. She smiled. She didn't remember the details, but she remembered the feeling. And that's what I hold on to now. Rachel didn't just steal our money. She stole our time. The time Emily and I had left before the disease took her completely. Time that should have been quiet, gentle, safe. Instead, those final years are marked by fear, trauma, and the echo of a basement door slamming shut. That is what I will never forgive. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. It's about drawing a line and saying, this matters. As for Emily and me, we're still here, still together, still fighting for every good moment we have left. That's more than Rachel wanted for us, and it's more than she'll have for a very long time.